Hey everyone, welcome back to the Digital Deep Dive Show, episode number 14 with Nilay Daily. If you are new around here, the Digital Deep Dive Show aims to showcase incredible technology and the exceptional people building it, using it, and the impact it has on business and society at large. As always, you can subscribe to this on Apple Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, or you can go over to LinkedIn and subscribe to my newsletter and have every episode added to your LinkedIn feed. This week's episode, we are going to talk about Meta's new social app, Threads, McKinsey's report on the future of B2B sales, and a roundtable discussion on privacy regs, risks, and enforcement. We're going to do a recap on the Chicago tech scene, rounding out June and Tech Week here in Chicago. We've got a special podcast feature from Verge editor-in-chief Nilay Patel and Google's Sundar Pichai, as well as talking about where you can find me in real life so we can meet up together and have a Negroni, or where we can jam on Zoom, Team, Google Hangouts, and get to know each other through the great white light that is the intranet. All right, with all that said, I just want to remind you that all thoughts, ideas are my own and not shared by any organization. And with that said, let's jump into the show. So in the news, we have a huge, massive launch from Meta. They went out and they launched Threads. It's their competitor to Twitter, Mastodon, Blue Sky, just to name a few. Thread is a very similar UI UX experience and is directly aimed at competing with those text-based social networks. Where I think it differs is that Meta is going more into, in my opinion, the consumer lens of let me tweet something funny or comical, whereas Twitter still seems, to me personally, more like a place to do business, find out about news and politics. So if I was going to draw like a Venn diagram, I would think of Instagram and Threads is more of like my friends and my family, whereas Twitter is much more on the professional and information gathering, and LinkedIn is much more on, I'd say, also information gathering, but much more of that professional network. What I have seen, and I know we're talking about Threads, but what I have seen with Twitter and some of the content that Elon and his team have been putting out is they're likely going to be going into micropayments to third-party news providers, which means if you weren't, say, subscribing to New York Times or Wall Street Journal, you could actually consume that article for a few pennies by opting in ahead of time. So what does this mean, though, for Twitter? So as soon as Threads launched, you obviously had a massive swing of users going towards that platform, trying to check things out. And Meta did a fantastic thing of allowing users to sign up for Threads. You do have to buy a different app, but you could port all of your information, i.e. users, followers, from Instagram to Threads. So instantly you didn't have to go build up this network that I think people are starting to get new network fatigue syndrome. And you saw, I think, it was like real quick, you jumped up to 30 million users, and then I think they've surpassed 100 million users. Don't quote me on that number, but definitely over 30 million. And it's a great user experience. They haven't rolled it out internationally, so you're only seeing a few percentage points of Instagram's total user population on Threads. But if they were able to monetize this solution, this would be a nice lift in the stock price, I'm sure, over at Meta. And it will be interesting to see once the initial hype and exploration of this app concludes, how many people stay on Threads, how many people are using Threads and Twitter, Threads, Twitter, and Instagram, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So go download it if you haven't already downloaded it, and let me know in the comments what you think of Threads and how you're using it in your sort of app ecosystem of sharing content, both personally and professionally. All right, the next story is one that I read over the weekend and was really impressed with. It's a McKinsey piece on the future of B2B sales and building the right team and talent to drive growth and uncertain environment. It really talks about the overview of the article is that sales is a business about people, and getting the right talent is vital. Companies must consider their talent strategies and sales roles. They need to continue growth. The pandemic kind of accelerated the shift to a hybrid work, and this article was really trying to say, like, what does a modern sales organization look like? Is it outside? Is it inside? Is it inside plus outside? Is it a hybrid role? And a couple key takeaways from the article was that the future of B2B sales is hybrid. Companies need to basically adapt their sales strategy to meet a hybrid buyer who wants the flexibility to interact with sales reps in person, online, over the phone, multi-channels. And if you think about that from a technology lens, organizations need to provide their sales teams with those features and functionalities and abilities to track it and provide that information internally in a seamless, effortless, and keyword effortless manner. If you make it too challenging for sales reps to capture some of that information, they will punt, so they can move on to those things that drive revenue into their funnel. The next was that customer first is the new imperative. That B2B companies need to put customers at the center of their sales efforts by personalizing the buyer journey and providing relevant information and insights at every stage. I only partially agree with this takeaway from McKinsey. I don't know why you would ever not put the customer at the center of things. I understand personalization across the journey and not having sort of the standard slide deck or information, but really tailoring that. And that's becoming easier to do. Obviously, you can do that in a manual effort, but there are ways to do that in a real systematic way through systems and databases where they're pulling information like a newsletter or email outreach or text outreach, et cetera. So, I think I just am getting hung up on the words there, but the theme there makes sense to me. The third is data-driven insights are essential. B2B companies need to use data to understand their customers' needs and preferences and identify the best channels for messaging them. That just feels like as you increase the number of channels, you just need to figure out where your buyer prefers to interact. Is it over email? Is it a text? Is it a phone? Is it LinkedIn? Whatever, WhatsApp. The list goes on of channels that customers have reached out to me and say, I want to learn more about your organization. And then the last is invest in your people, basically just skilling them up, giving them sales training. And I think that's pretty obvious. I think sales folks really struggle because, it's a competitive nature for the most part, probably a little less of a mentorship model, and comparing it to other parts of the organization. It's kind of a kill what you eat or eat what you kill. Sorry. And, that's a little tough, but I do think organizations need to think about best practices and training and cross-training their staff. So it's an interesting article. If you are in sales or running a sales organization, I highly recommend you checking out this article. You could clearly tell I enjoyed the article. I agreed with some of the content, maybe disagreed with a few of the nuances, but I like what McKinsey always puts out. I think they usually do a pretty good job with benchmark data and capabilities maps. So it's a good one in there if you're building a B2B sales organization, or you're really just trying to think through how do I enhance my sales organization. My third story for news and tech is talking about privacy regs, risks, and enforcements, a primer for the perplexed. So the overview here is that the U.S. has 5 broad-based GDPR-like privacy regulations gearing up for enforcement in 2023. So these are across California, Colorado, Connecticut, Utah, and Virginia. These privacy regulations are comprehensive and impose obligations on organizations to go far beyond a breach event. The million-dollar question is, how can an organization manage risk and compliance requirements for both the domestic and international privacy regulations that already exist and are changing every day? So let me break that down. GDPR is the ability for organizations to essentially not store your information, or you have the right to be forgotten in Europe. Based on what was going on in GDPR, California adopted similar principles Then it moved over to Virginia, and it has moved to Colorado, Connecticut, and Utah. From a personal perspective in the U.S., I would have liked to have seen a national approach versus a state-by-state. It is making it challenging for interstate commerce and for organizations to manage these rules. The topics covered during this fireside chat provide a practical overview of the latest regulations and how you can transfer privacy-regulated risks through insurance policies, and how regulations will affect the growing use of technologies such as biometrics and artificial tools. If you want to have a listen to the web recording, I've linked it in the show notes on LinkedIn. Through the newsletter. You've got Deborah Nitka, who's a senior manager with me at Cohen Resnick. Just to highlight that we do work together, but this is not a paid post by Cohen Resnick. We also have Kelly Geary, who's a managing principal and practice leader for Insurance Capital Group. And then you had Richard Sheridan, who's the chief claims officer at Berkeley Cyber Risk Solutions. Cyber is continuing to be something that organizations need to know more and more about. Data privacy is becoming increasingly a larger component of your overall privacy and risk apparatus. And it's moving from the back of the house sort of IT into the boardroom extremely quickly. I would say outside of AI, there's probably no topic that has moved from the back office or from the middle of the workforce to the boardroom faster than data privacy and overall security framework. So have a listen to the recording. Let me know what you think. And that wraps it up for the news in tech. Let's jump over to talking about the Chicago Spotlight. So thanks to the team at Built-in Chicago, they put out a fantastic piece about the tech funding for June. It was a little over $200 million. Last episode, we covered Paro, and we talked about their latest raise. They're in Chicago as well as a few other states, but they have a pretty nice little presence here in Chicago. But I wanted to dive into another company that had a successful June, and that was Copilot. And you can check them out at Copilot Platforms. Copilot, not to be confused with the new service offering that Microsoft is putting out as part of their use of ChatGPT 4 within the Microsoft Office suite. Copilot, the company, provides tech services to business like law firms and marketing agencies to help them grow, incorporating tools like client proposals and messagings. The company pulled in a Series A funding led by YC Continuity to expand its team across engineering and product. So my takeaway from their funding round and Copilot as someone who went and checked out the platform at a high level is that as more business to business organizations need to incorporate and execute like B2C businesses, solutions like Copilot give clients a one-stop shop experience with a client portal that streamlines messaging, payment, file sharing, help center, custom app access, and more. So, I've seen firsthand organizations that really do this poorly and try to live and breathe by email. And it's, let me send you documents, wrong versions, people leave the team, I don't have those documents, did you invoice me, did I pay you? And, this makes total sense. If I was in the Copilot team, I'd be trying to very quickly probably align myself with some underperforming ERPs or ERPs that I could bolt onto and provide like the front end gateway that makes it a little easier for organizations that have certain ERPs that maybe don't have this functionality, and really try to partner with a Zapper or something like a Jitterbit or basically any iPaaS solution that could help bring those two pieces of functionality together. But for more and more businesses trying to mimic B2C sort of engagement with their customers, I think we're going to see more companies like Copilot, and I look forward to seeing Copilot move from Series A to Series B in my hometown of Chicago. Going from the podcast, I just want to do a quick highlight in the Chicago Tech Week. It was here all week, number of great events. If you checked out Chicago Tech Week, I'm very interested to hear what you thought was the best panels and what were your kind of key themes besides, let's say, AI that were being discussed. I know a lot of the events I attended were much more around Series A funding and Series B funding and looking for dollars and trying to see, where the market was headed, not as much on the late stage sort of Series C and Series D, but curious what you guys heard and where you guys think the industry is going within the Chicagoland market. Okay, going from a regional level or a city level here in Chicago, moving to sort of a national or global level, this week's podcast spotlight is the Decoder Show with Nilay Patel. Nilay is the editor of The Verge, and in the show he talks about big ideas and other problems. And in this episode, he meets with Google's Sundar Pichai to talk about AI and how Microsoft sort of came in and stole some of the, I'll call it clout or press, but what Google has done to merge two of their teams, one being DeepMind, and how long that they've actually already been working on AI and what is to come within deploying sort of AI and AI services across the Google stack, as well as bringing individual or new products like Bard to market, what that means for Google, how they do it, how they think about it, and what the industry at large should be thinking about it. It's about a 45-minute Q&A. I think Nilay does a nice job of balancing, kind of harder hitting questions with general conversation. You can tell that Nilay has a relationship with Sundar and has, met him and interviewed him in the past. So that kind of disarms a little bit of the conversation. So if you are like me and get up early and do a lot of walking in the morning with your dog, I highly recommend not only tuning into my podcast, but checking out Decoder with Nilay, especially listening to this episode. Okay, let's go from podcast to events in real life and virtual. I've had a couple, in-person events in between episode number 13 and 14 that just didn't make the pod. So I'm going to talk about a couple virtual events that I've got coming up. So the next one is the State of Human Capital. This is the world of work is changing rapidly, and organizations need to adapt their human capital strategies to keep up. This briefing series will explore the key trends in human capital in 2023 and how organizations can use these trends to their advantage. So the event is going to be held on Wednesday, August 23rd from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m. If you would like an invite, send an email to contact@lewismanning.com. You can read more about the event via the event link within the newsletter. The next one is also a virtual event, and that's the Strategic Performance Building Culture. So this is the first of a series from the Denison Consulting team. They will be joined by Dr. Stephanie Phillips from Oklahoma State University. It's not OU where my family kind of matriculates from, but it's still Oklahoma, so we like it. For this session, they're going to be exploring firm performance, research, and client examples of integrating cultures with strategic priorities. For someone like myself that ends up doing a fair bit of work in and around the transaction space, bringing people together, separating people, bringing even like multiple organizations or new people into an existing organization, takes a lot of effort. I think businesses don't account for the amount of time, energy, and effort that takes, and trying to match the right candidates and or teams to teams together is incredibly difficult. And at least walking into those situations, knowing kind of a baseline and the data to pivot from, or to leverage rather, to make better decisions in terms of teams and individuals that will work versus won't work, or that, trying to use that information and data to try to figure out the level of effort that is going to likely be required to merge teams together, can help organizations and sponsors really win in the M&A landscape. So excited to hear this first presentation, see some of the data and insights, and looking forward to the rest of the series from the Denison team. All right, that wraps it up for, there's one more I forgot about, the event in Wisconsin. We got the summer social at the Deer District Beer Garden. That is going to be on August 10th from 5 p.m. to 7:30. So if you're going to be up in Milwaukee, let me know. Looking forward to going and checking out that ACG event. And let's try this again. That wraps up the show. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe to the show on Twitter and Instagram. That's the Digital 3D Show. And you can check it out on Apple Podcasts, Anchor, Google Podcasts, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and the web at pogpaid.com, Digital Deep Dive Show. I hope you enjoyed it. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn, posts, and my website. Because of the unique spelling, it's all Reed Daily, REDTAILEY. And with that said, I hope you enjoy your weekend, and we'll catch you on the next episode. Thank you for tuning in.